Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a deeply atmospheric and frankly completely chilling narrative about a place known simply as the University of Mediumship. Picture this. You're visiting Salem, Massachusetts. You're wandering just past the tourist traps, right where the souvenir shops kind of fade out and the roads narrow down into these old stone boundaries. Well, you might just walk right past an institution that the locals never point out. In This Explainer, we're going to unpack the deep lore of this university. We'll look at the face it shows the world, the terrifying secrets it's got buried in its soil, and the absolute extreme lengths an institution will go to just to erase its own history. You are not here to summon spirits. You are here to learn restraint. That is the chilling welcome Dean Anthony Turkovich gives to incoming students. Just let that sink in for a second. He's telling them straight up that belief is power, and power without ethics, that's harm. He delivers this with a hushed intensity that immediately sets this super strict philosophy. Notice how he totally avoids the word truth? Yeah, the focus here is entirely on control. It's literally the perfect overarching facade for a university steeped in the supernatural. Okay, let's dive into this. Because, as structured and disciplined as the dean really wants this place to look, the reality is way, way more sinister. We've got a school explicitly teaching restraint to psychics and mediums, right? It's presenting itself as this ultimate sanctuary of ethics. But what happens when the institution itself is actively covering up its own supernatural foundation? Like, what happens when the very ground you're walking on is actively hiding the darkest spirits of all? Section 1. Welcome to the university, the facade. Let's set the scene here, because the physical campus is incredibly unsettling. It actually looks less like a prestigious school and way more like a place at war with its own history. And this brilliantly illustrates the central conflict of the school. On one hand, you have the stated purpose, the stuff printed on the glossy brochures and preached by the dean, which is to learn restraint and ethics. But the hidden purpose? As the ethics professor Roberta Hornsby chillingly reveals to Jason, it's far more defensive. She straight up warns him that the school wasn't built to study its founders' lost manuscripts. No, it was built to make sure no one ever tries to find them. The entire institution is essentially a giant guard dog for a forgotten secret. To really understand how they maintain this facade, we gotta look at this highly eclectic and honestly slightly unsettling faculty roster. You've got Mary Beth Littleton doing psychometry. She's literally reading memories off of objects. Then there's Robert Gordon teaching occult history. He's totally dismissive of mysticism, but at the same time fiercely protective of its records. Roberta Hornsby handles ethics with this completely unreadable expression. And Jack Jameson runs the practicum. He comes off as charming, but deeply unsettling. As Jason quickly realizes, none of these professors actually seem to agree on what the university is for. Their highly specialized, totally fragmented nature, it perfectly mirrors the fractured purpose of the school itself. Section 2. The missing manuscripts, the cracks. Because, as with any facade, cracks are eventually going to show, specifically in the form of missing texts written by the founder himself. So, let's define exactly who we're talking about here. Dr. Roderick Luddington. He was a 17th century physician and a psychic, and he owned this land way before the infamous Salem witch trials even kicked off. And what's super fascinating is that England didn't exile him for witchcraft. Actually, they thought that was way too crude. They exiled him for something far more dangerous, his influence. He scared the absolute wrong people in power because he fundamentally understood how belief spreads, and more importantly, how memory can be manipulated. So what actually happened to Luddington's writings? Well, during a lecture, Professor Gordon admits that the manuscripts are missing. But get this, they aren't just misplaced. They are strictly uncatalogued and were unofficially removed by people who were terrified of what Luddington understood. Later on, Professor Hornsby goes even further. She confirms to Jason that these texts were hidden, scattered, and intentionally erased for one very specific reason. And it wasn't because they were dangerous theories. No, they were suppressed simply because they worked. It really begs a massive question. What kind of university fears its own foundation? I mean, really, just think about that for a second. An academic institution is supposed to be completely dedicated to the pursuit and preservation of knowledge, right? But here, the very bedrock of their knowledge is treated like a radioactive threat that absolutely has to be buried. Section 3. Unearthing the orchard. The investigation. This is where this whole theoretical mystery becomes horrifyingly real, all thanks to a student's vision that breaks the secret wide open. So Laurie wakes up with this awful taste of iron in her mouth after a dream that feels terrifyingly intentional. In this dream, she meets a very solid, mud-stained woman named Abigail Fowler. Abigail was a servant to Dr. Luddington back in the 1600s, and she gives Laurie this deeply urgent spectral message. They buried something that was never meant to stay hidden. They moved the markers, not the dead. Man, what a chilling distinction. The markers were moved, but the dead, they were left behind. Let's move to and see how this builds through this really physical, visceral investigation step by step. Step 1. Laurie walks straight out to a lichen-covered stone at the edge of this neglected apple orchard on campus. Step 2. Jason touches the stone, actually feels the psychic echo of a shallow pit being dug at dusk, and they just start digging through the cold soil with their bare hands. Step 3, they hit metal, pulling out this rusted iron box. And finally, step 4, inside they discover a single, brittle, handwritten page detailing a framework on influence and memory, right alongside an old hand-drawn map of the original grounds marked as the Cromwell Tract. They literally dig up the forbidden foundation. Section 4, an institution of forgetting, the buried truth. That map they found points directly to an old cemetery, and the reality of what the university actually did is just staggering. We can actually track the exact evolution of this cover-up. Back in the 1600s, Luddington owns the land and establishes his personal study. Fast forward a bit to the Civil War era. The university decides it needs to expand, so they want to consolidate. Under the guise of, patriotic efficiency, they move the headstones of the Cromwell Cemetery. But as Professor Gordon confirms, you don't actually move bodies unless you absolutely have to. So they just left them. They left the bodies of the servants, the laborers, the unimportant people right where they were. And in the present day, well, the university planted a beautiful blooming rose garden directly over the forgotten dead. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the deliberate, almost architectural malice behind this design. When she's confronted about the rose garden, Professor Hornsby doesn't even try to deny it. She explains the landscaping was designed for exactly that purpose: to soften, to beautify, to forget. That garden isn't just a garden. It is a highly calculated, beautiful cover-up designed to literally mask the scent of death and completely erase the memory of the people buried beneath those flowers. This leads us to an incredibly emotional core moment. Jason goes out alone to the rose garden. The scent of the roses is completely overwhelming, actively working to mask the truth. But the second he touches the soil, his psychometry kicks in. The pressure of hundreds of forgotten names just presses right into his mind. And they aren't loud, they're incredibly patient. He connects with these lives that were reduced to mere footnotes: the servants, the laborers, the folks deemed just too unimportant to properly relocate. And amidst all that heavy sorrow, one lingering presence reaches out to him. It doesn't ask to be saved, it simply radiates a feeling of thank you, just for acknowledging they even exist. Later, Laurie joins Jason in the garden, and she delivers this stark, incredibly impactful realization. This place, it's built on forgetting. It hits the nail on the head and perfectly cements the narrative theme of institutional erasure. I mean, they aren't just hiding an old book. The very soil, the architecture, the entire curriculum of the university, the whole shebang is entirely constructed to ensure the past stays buried. And the story leaves us right on the edge of a cliff. Back in his quiet office, Dean Turkovich is looking over a security report that shows disturbed ground out near the old orchard. Does he panic? No way. He just closes the file and murmurs, "So, it's begun." It is such a chilling acceptance. The dean absolutely knows the secret is out, and all that restraint he's been preaching, it's about to be severely tested against the true raw power of the university's origins. So the crucial point is this: what is the true cost of uncovering a history that an institution has desperately built its entire foundation to erase? Whether we're talking about a fictional university hiding ghostly secrets or real-world institutions burying their own uncomfortable truths beneath beautiful facades, the act of remembering is inherently disruptive. Jason and Laurie didn't just dig up a rusty iron box. They unearthed the suppressed memory of an entire class of forgotten people. It really leaves us wondering, once you strip away all those beautiful roses, are you prepared to face what's buried underneath? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating explainer with me today.